Innovation has always been a driver of economic growth, and nowhere is this phenomenon more tangible than in the field of genome editing technology. Breakthrough discoveries are accelerating the pace of modern biological and biotechnological research, resulting in innovations that have the potential to help us restructure healthcare, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and enhance the quality of life. Joining us today are Stefan Matatia, Managing Director at MSCI, Simon Barnett, Director of Life Sciences Research at ARC Investment Management, and Caíque Cardoso, ETF Specialist at Itaú Asset Management, who will all share how genomic innovation is creating opportunities for investors. These innovations encompass technological and scientific developments in DNA sequencing, gene editing, targeted therapeutics, bioinformatics, and agricultural biology. Stefan, could you please kick us off? After living with COVID for 3 years now, numerous developments have been observed in the field of genomics. MSCI has launched an index focusing on genomics innovations, helping investors to understand how this niche space can help. Can you tell us a little bit about MSCI's decision to create the index and how it's constructed?
Of course, Jonathan. So indeed, MSCI created thematic indexes back in 2018, and the global purpose of this series of indexes is to capture megatrends. And of course, with megatrends, we mean those big evolutions that are coming across the technologies, the society, the environment, the economy, and that will impact and shape our world for the coming 20 or 30 years. So that when we look at megatrends today, maybe we have a first oversight of what our world would be in 2040 or even 2050. So that we had identified back in 2019 genomic as one of the most important megatrends, so even before the COVID pandemic. And then the question for MSCI was how to structure an index. And it won't be a secret for anyone that within MSCI you don't have biology experts, so we were slightly far from our comfort zone of finance. And this is why we found with ARC Invest, because within ARC, we could find the expertise that allowed us to understand how the genomic ecosystem was structured. And as you mentioned, Jonathan, even if everyone has in mind genomics, the ARN vaccine, as you said, genomic is much broader with gene editing, bioinformatics, agricultural biology, so that through this structuration with ARC Invest, we could understand which were exactly the fields that we needed to identify for each company. This allowed us by screening companies' description to identify which company are relevant and then create the index by selecting the companies for which this thematic was the most relevant. And this is how we came to this index launched in 2019.
Caíque, what was Itaú's thought process behind launching the DNA 11? And could you share some detail on how you help investors access such an interesting theme?
Yeah, sure. We have the DNA 11, which is an ETF that tracks the Genomic Innovation Index that is provided for our friend here at the MSCI. So this theme, genomic innovation, is very interesting. I mean, it has such a huge influence in our lives, right? So this is a big deal. This is important. And the other kind of thing that is really interesting here to observe is that it doesn't really relate to economic cycle, just like other asset classes and other sectors. It has such a more relevance because of that, because it may sound silly, but it's kind of true. Our health doesn't really follow the interest rate curve. So it has a different dynamic of it. Obviously, economic outlook is really important, but it's not really all about it. So, and also when we look into healthcare, we're looking in something that is related to our well-being and has a lot of different research that is really important, such as like cancer treatments, other kind of therapies, or maybe even drugs, new drugs development. So it's a huge deal here. And when we're talking about genomic innovation, we're not only reaching out for healthcare sectors, but also for agricultural sectors, which is another big economy that we do have. I mean, it's what we eat, right? So I think we do have a huge opportunity here. And with that insight, we were wondering how do we provide this kind of solution to our clients. With the MSCI that has a very big experience in providing index and such solutions for us. And this ETF tracks the MSCI index of genomic innovation that is all about US stocks. So it's a very efficient way and also a very cost-effective way. I mean, the DNA I-11 has a 50 basis point of management fee, which is really competitive, even if we're looking to international markets for this kind of theme, this kind of investment. So it's cost-effective and definitely efficient because we do invest directly in the stocks. We don't invest throughout another ETF. So we in Itaú Asset, as the largest private asset management in Brazil, feel the duty to bring out this theme through such a good structure that, again, is cost-effective and efficient.
Simon, this is a very cool topic that is disrupting the health and agricultural industries. You've been MSCI's go-to expert on disruptive innovation indexes. Can you tell us about how you see this theme going forward and what developments we should expect?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that, and thank you for having me on. So let me start with a more topical example, and then I'd be happy to generalize and discuss several of the other areas that the previous speakers have mentioned, ranging from medicines to diagnostics and even to agriculture. So I'll start talking about COVID-19. As I'm sure many people listening may know, this took the world by storm and became a global pandemic rather quickly. But what they may not know is that genomic technologies, namely DNA sequencing, computational modeling, and several other tools, worked in tandem to allow us to respond to the virus with a vaccine in incredible amounts of time, right? So the first sequence in China was detected, merely days after it was discovered, and we were able to design several effective vaccines against it in record time. In addition to that, decentralized diagnostic tools, especially those powered by sequencing, helped the World Health Organizations and different governments understand how the virus was evolving and spreading over time. So if you think about it, these technologies enabled us to take what is, absolutely a severe global pandemic and be able to contain it and control it in an amount of time that would not have been possible without these technologies. So bridging across from there, many of these same innovative platforms like DNA sequencing, gene editing, which you can think about as our ability to read DNA and our ability to edit or even write DNA, these are changing every facet of healthcare. So maybe I'll mention a few examples. When you think about drug discovery, typically people may know that it takes more than 10 years and over several $1 billion to bring a drug to market. But last year was a really important year for the industry where small biopharma companies that are leveraging tools like artificial intelligence and DNA sequencing in new ways are actually contributing now more than half of innovative therapeutics into clinical trial processes. So there's a major share shift happening. And what we would hope and expect over the next market cycle is that the average cost and the average time to develop a novel therapeutic goes down. And with this, the return on an invested dollar in R&D would go up ostensibly. We think over the next market cycle that we'll see a lot of small, innovative biotech companies start to challenge the order of big pharma, as it were. And in addition to that, an area that I'm extremely passionate about is early detection of many diseases. Some people may know that conditions like cancer are much easier to treat if diagnosed early, where the cancer is contained to one region of the body. Already, we're seeing sequencing, DNA and RNA sequencing powered diagnostics that are less invasive, so they can be done with lab instead of access to tissue. These are now becoming more effective and also cheaper than classic techniques like medical imaging, which allow oncologists to detect recurrences or relapses of cancer as much as 6 to 8 months before would otherwise be the case. And this is extremely critical for being able to act swiftly, at the first signs of cancer. In addition to other diseases like infectious disease, cardiology, rare disease, especially, I think it may surprise some people to know that the first whole human genome wasn't sequenced until last year, actually, which is giving us a new lens into solving, previously intractable rare diseases. And then I'll end by just quickly discussing agriculture because it is so important. Every living thing on this planet shares the same genetic code. The A's, T's, G's, and C's that make up our genomes are the same ones that make up all sorts of different crops and plants and animals. And so the tools that are empowering healthcare are the same ones that are empowering agriculture. And already we're seeing the field of synthetic biology, which is genetic engineering, is allowing us to imbue crops with traits that are desirable, such as resistance to hazardous conditions, the ability to extract more nutrients from the environment, and hopefully taken together, these will allow us to contend with population growth and be able to still provide, those necessary downstream products to individuals.
Caíque, clearly we see how the revolution in genomics is paving the way for newer opportunities within the investment theme. Can you tell us about Itaú Asset Management's approach to these kinds of strategies?
Well, that's a great question. Thanks for that. I think what just Simon brought to us is a very good example to highlight how the world is changing so rapidly. I mean, if we look just 10 years back and we see how we're today and how we were 10 years back, we'll see a bunch of changes and changes in many different ways. I mean, the way that we communicate, the way that we treat ourselves, or even the way that we consume. And even if we just take e-commerce for an example of that, I mean, e-commerce 10 years back, it wasn't a very huge market. It was a good market, but not a very huge market as it is today. And this is mostly because we were trying to understand and to relate with this another kind of culture and the way that we do consume. So e-commerce is really different today from what it was 10 years back. And if I bring to myself, I just remember how insecure I was to buy clothes online. And this is interesting because today I don't have this kind of fear and I don't have this insecurities. And this applies to other kinds of stuffs. So this just highlights how the world is changing. And if the world is changing so fast and we do have a lot of disruptions yet to come, how do we translate that in our investment portfolio? How do we anticipate that? And it just makes so much sense to think in that way because when we're thinking thematic investments, it's all about anticipating a huge disruption. And anticipating is all about what we do in the investment space. We are always trying to anticipate something. Maybe it's just a company cash flow or the interest rates in 10 years. So when we do that kinds of exercise in thematic space, it just makes so much sense. So as you can see, I'm a huge fan for thematic investments. And when we bring that to Brazil's reality, I do think we have a huge opportunity here. But we do have some challenges that we have to go through it. And maybe I can just highlight those challenges that we have, because when we're thinking about thematic investments, and just take for an example, the genomic innovation, we do have to access internationally because Brazil has a very limited stock market. We cannot put together 50 companies that is related to genomic innovation here in Brazil. So we won't be diversified. We may have a very concentrated risk if we try to reach out this theme just limited to Brazilian market. So from our point of view, it's very important to reach out for investments market. And that being said, this leads to our next challenge, which is international exposure for portfolios. Brazil has a huge home bias, so we have to pass on it. And this is the first stage to try to reach out for thematic investment. I think we should try to bring more a culture to invest internationally for Brazilian investors, and then try to put out a bunch of those different strategies and thematic strategies that you can also access internationally. So it's kind of a journey. It's definitely a process. It won't be a short-term process. It'll be a long-term process, but we're all about it. I mean, we're the largest asset private management in Brazil, so we do feel the duty and the responsibility to trying to bring what's next on investment space to Brazilian investors.
And Simon, can you tell me a specific case of how innovation in genetics has gained market share?
Yes. So I want to just call back to a comment earlier about healthcare not being something that's put on pause by interest rate changes or all these different kind of externalities. Something that we really needed to focus on during the pandemic was maintaining the quality of care for cancer patients. When COVID came out, it wreaked havoc on the pulmonology clinics, the lung clinics that were in major hospitals. There was a 60% drawdown globally in the amount of oncology visits for patients that were afflicted with lung cancer because they could not get into these hospitals. They were so dangerous that you couldn't get your surgery, your biopsy done, that you need to be put on a medicine to help treat you for that disease. So what happened? Well, something called a liquid biopsy, meaning our ability to extract a non-invasive blood draw, even at your home, that could suffice and replace that tissue biopsy. This market, which is powered by genetic technologies, doubled almost every year during the pandemic, and many oncologists became more familiar with this technology. We think that this market is somewhere on the order of $25 to $50 billion globally, the ability to track and monitor cancer non-invasively through blood, and it's uniquely enabled by genetic technology. So this is an example of how the community rallied around a really terrible scenario, and it actually pushed innovation to the forefront of adoption.
Well, thank you for that. And Stefan, Caíque, Simon, thank you all for joining us today and discussing how genomics presents significant opportunities to investors looking forward.
Thank you for having me.
Great, thanks.